The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. It is a pleasure to share with you all the launch of our new ASAP program. As many of you know, my name is Katrina Johansson, and I am the Executive Director of the California School Finance Authority. I've overseen the authority and its programs for nearly 20 years now. Recently, as chair of CSFA, State Treasurer Fiona Ma called on the authority to assist California's education sector weather the COVID-induced recession and the effects of state deferrals. The ASAP program is one of the results of these efforts. We hope you find today's webinar informative and that it provides you with the tools you will need to withstand the state deferrals. We have created this program to be secure, low cost, and streamlined. Now it is time for the obligatory housekeeping slide. Angela? If you're experiencing any technical problems, please contact GoToMeeting at 877-582-7011, or you can try the website at the address on the screen to troubleshoot your problems. The slides for today's presentation are available in PDF form in the handout section of the webinar control panel, as well as linked in the webinar chat. We also encourage you to submit questions during the broadcast using the box marked questions near the bottom of your control panel. You may submit questions at any time as they come to mind. Time permitting, we will be taking as many questions as we can at the end of our session during the Q&A period. Additionally, if you would like access to live captioning during the program, click on the link in the chat section at the bottom of your control panel, or copy and paste the address on the screen into a second web browser. And lastly, CSFA will make the webinar recording available on our program webpage as soon as possible. Angela? The California School Finance Authority was created in 1984 when then Treasurer Jess Unruh had a vision to expand the powers of the office. He created boards, commissions, and authorities to meet the various infrastructure needs throughout the state, such as educational and health facilities, pollution control, and advanced transportation, and alternative energy, to name a few. CSFA was created to finance educational facilities and working capital on behalf of school districts, county offices of education, community college districts, and most recently, nonprofit charter school borrowers. As a governmental entity, CSFA is governed by a 3-member board, with 2 of those members being statewide elected officials. The authority is chaired by State Treasurer Fiona Ma, with Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurman and Director of Finance Keely Martin-Bosler serving as members. CSFA currently administers 10 active state and federal debt and grant programs. As most of you know, CSFA administers the state's SB 740 Facility Grant Program, the state's Charter School Facilities Program, a robust conduit bond financing program that routinely issues debt into the capital markets on behalf of nonprofit borrowers such as charter schools, our bank loan program, the Charter Able program, which is being used to enhance the ASAP program, the Panacea program, which is another credit enhancement program, the Charter School Revolving Loan Fund, which provides low-interest loans to new charter schools, the State Charter School Facilities Incentive Grant Program, the Charter School Facilities Credit Enhancement Grant Program, and lastly, our new ASAP program. Through these programs, the authority has disbursed over $4 billion to charter schools since 2002. As drafted, the CSFA Act provides broad statutory authority to issue short and long-term debt on a standalone or pooled basis. CSFA is set apart from other conduit issuers because of its state-level intercept mechanism, which can be found in Section 171994 of the Education Code. The intercept mechanism allows borrowers to make debt service payments at the state level. Through an intercept schedule, borrowers notify the state controller to make payments on behalf of investors to bond trustees. This mechanism ensures that timely payments are made and improves investor security. Additionally, CSFA is supported by the state's treasurer's Public Finance Division. As agent for sale, the Public Finance Division oversees all bond and note pricing activity and other tasks to ensure borrowers are achieving the lowest cost. The state attorney general's office serves as issuer's counsel on all financings issued through CSFA. Notably, CSFA holds monthly board meetings and has the flexibility to hold special meetings. And for nonprofit borrowers, CSFA holds state-level, no-cost TEFRA hearings. And lastly, as a governmental entity, CSFA is mission-driven, not transaction-driven. All debt issued through CSFA is placed with investors commensurate with the credit quality set forth in our bond issuance guidelines. CSFA has set low issuer and administrative fees to further bring down overall borrowing cost. And CSFA has consistent leadership and the support of top financial advisory firms. Angela? Since 1999, CSFA has issued over $1.7 billion in short and long-term debt on behalf of school districts and nonprofit charter schools. Of the 93 transactions closed, 18 were working capital notes financing totaling almost $200 million, while 75 financings were issued on a long-term basis. CSFA has been awarded 3 federal grants totaling $37 million to enhance debt issued through the authority. One of these grants has leveraged one $8 million grant 17 times, resulting in nearly $150 million issued. So to the reason we're all here today, our new ASAP program. Angela? With the announcement that 36% of state aid will be deferred, CSFA recognized the need for external short-term borrowing by early 2021 to maintain financial liquidity. The ASAP program was offered to provide charter schools and charter management organizations a transparent, low-cost alternative to bank lines of credit and the sale of apportionment receivables or factoring. CSFA will issue tax and revenue anticipation notes to investors and use those proceeds to make loans to charter schools on the same terms. Charter schools will use these loans as a cash bridge over the February to November 2021 deferral period. With CSFA's direction, the charter schools' deferred apportionments will be accessed directly by the state controller to automatically repay the loan with no further action required by the school. Angela? We have convened a team of professionals with extensive education finance expertise to assist with the ASAP program. We are pleased to announce that Montague DeRose is serving as the municipal advisor on the program. Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe will serve as note counsel, Nixon Peabody as disclosure counsel, and RBC Capital Markets and Citigroup are serving as joint senior managing underwriters. We also have the support of other state agencies, such as the Department of Finance, the California Department of Education, and the State Controller's Office. CSFA will be serving as issuer, and the State Attorney General's Office will serve as issuer's counsel. Angela? At this time, we are thrilled to introduce our panel of experts for today's webinar. Eric Premack, the Executive Director and founder of the Charter School Development Center, Nick Watson, Senior Advisor Facilities of the California Charter Schools Association, John Solarzik is Managing Director at RBC Capital Markets, Mike Kramer is the Managing Director at Montague DeRose and Associates, and Mark Bauer is a partner at Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe. We are going to spend the next 60 minutes or so discussing the 2021 deferrals and exemptions, potential options if cash is short, the ASAP program, timing of the program, mechanisms of the program, applying for the program, the legal structure and documents needed to participate in the program. We will, if time permits, have a Q&A portion, and then we will provide you with contact information. At this time, it is my honor and privilege to turn the webinar over to Eric Premack.
Thank you, Katrina. We appreciate the work that you and all of your colleagues at CSFA are doing on this program. As most of our participants today know, the state's 2021 budget and the related trailer bills enacted $12.9 billion worth of deferrals of state aid to education agencies in California. And specifically, these defer large portions of the usual monthly state aid payments to education agencies, including charter schools. These defer the state, not only the state aid component of the local control funding formula, but also the state component of the so-called AB 602 special education formula, along with a number of other items, with these other items typically not applicable to charter school, but certainly the LCFF and special ed pieces are. These deferrals will not affect the local property tax nor the education protection account portions of the principal apportionment and only affect the state aid component. This first of these deferrals already occurred this past June and deferred the entire June state aid payment into July and were paid mid-July. It's worth noting that this June to July deferral is a permanent feature of state law unless state law is amended. Next slide, please. In addition to the July deferral, the budget trailer bill enacted a number of one-time deferrals of the spring 2021 principal apportionment, including deferring about $1.5 billion of the February state aid payment for 9 months into November, and it'll defer another $2.4 billion in each of the months of March, April, and May by 7 months, 5 months, and 3 months respectively, such that a significant portion of the state aid that is normally due to you will arrive several months late. And since the June apportionment is baked permanently into the education code, it too will be deferred in its entirety in 2021 and in subsequent years into July. While state budget staff have informed us that they don't plan any changes to the size or duration of these deferrals, I will note that our experience during the Great Recession was that sometimes these things changed. Angela, next slide, please. This table illustrates how this will affect your state aid. The first column shows the related months. The second column displays how the state aid is usually apportioned to the majority of charter schools and school districts according to what is known on the street as the 559 schedule, because it follows that the first 2 months we pay 5% and the remaining months roughly 9% of the typical state aid amount. A small number of schools, it's worth knowing, are on a different schedule from the 559 schedule, and you can contact us for more details if you're one of those districts. The third column shows the percentage of state aid that will actually be apportioned next year according to estimates recently published by the California Department of Education that they posted last week. And if you tally them all up, you'll note that only about 64% of the state aid will be apportioned by the end of the year, with nearly 36% deferred until after the fiscal year. And the second to the last and last column display the month that the amounts will be apportioned and the percentage of the total amount of state aid owing that will be apportioned in the relevant months. We recommend that you use these to estimate the delays in state aid for your schools as part of a larger comprehensive monthly cash flow estimate so that you can gauge the depth and timing of the cash shortfalls that you may experience. Next slide, please. The trailer bill does allow for limited exemptions, as was the case during the Great Recession. The trailer bill, however, caps the total amount of exemptions at no more than $100 million statewide for each of the relevant months, pursuant to a yet-to-be-posted application. Schools that apply for these exemptions will need to submit a cash flow projection documenting their needs, and for charter schools, those must be approved and certified by the authorizing district and county office of education. Given the limited and capped nature of these exemptions, many schools and local education agencies, including charter schools, are planning to rely on programs like this one to be more certain of their cash flow. Whether your organization plans to apply for an exemption or not, however, it's presumably a good idea to develop some detailed monthly cash flow projections. And these will tell you, A, whether you have a cash flow problem to begin with, and if so, how large, when to borrow, and how much. And if you do plan to apply for an exemption, we would urge you to prepare these estimates quickly because the exemptions will be rationed on a first-come, first-served basis. I'll now hand off to Nick Watson from CCSA. Angela, next slide, please.
Thank you, Eric. CCSA has been working with CSFA and the charter school lenders for the last few months to ensure that California charter schools have access to affordable sources of working capital to make it through upcoming deferrals. We'd like to spend a few minutes today providing a high-level overview of the various options that are available to charter schools facing deferrals. The first option that schools might consider involves negotiating with creditors to delay or restructure payments. This approach can provide a temporary solution, but can also be costly, potentially damage a school's relationship with creditors, so these drawbacks should be taken into account. In terms of financing options, lines of credit with commercial lenders are available for charter schools. Lines of credit are typically low cost and simple to establish, but the amount of financing available might be too small for larger schools or networks. A traditional term loan from a bank or private lender is also an option for charter schools. Term loans are relatively straightforward to obtain, but interest and fees on term loans can be costly, especially for smaller organizations. Some private lenders provide financing via the sale of receivables or factoring, which requires a school to sell future state aid payments at a discount. The sale of receivables has worked for schools during previous deferrals, but costs can be high and difficult to assess. Tax revenue anticipation notes have not been widely available to charter schools in California previously, and the ASAP program is designed to meet this need. Trans sales can be complex and fees can be high, but interest rates are typically low. Charter leaders should carefully evaluate costs and structure of options, as some of these financing sources are complex. Moving ahead to the next slide. CCSA recently surveyed charter school leaders to learn more about their working capital needs. The feedback that we received from charter leaders told us that trans and sale of receivables were the two sources of financing that were the least understood. So we thought it would be helpful today to provide some additional information and a comparison of these two finance options. As we mentioned previously, trans allowed charter schools to borrow money that will be repaid with future funding. Charter schools can be pooled together for trans and be rated as a group for credit. And charter schools will not be asked to provide collateral. Additional considerations for trans include the costs that schools are required to pay, such as legal and other fees, as well as the interest that will accrue on the outstanding loan amounts. With receivable sales, charter schools should understand they will be agreeing to sell future state aid payments. Schools that sell receivables will have their credit risk profiled by the lender to determine rates. In some cases, factoring lenders will also require schools to provide collateral for the financing provided to the school. And typical factoring costs include upfront fees and a cost that is typically referred to as the discount rate. Moving ahead to the next slide. We thought it'd also be helpful today to show you how the costs associated with trans and receivable sales might play out under different financing scenarios. At this time, there are still several unknowns, so we prepared the tables on this page with a few different trans interest rates. In the first table, in the upper left corner of the page, you can see that schools that borrowed $750,000 or more at a 2% interest rate using trans would save thousands of dollars compared to a sale of receivables at 10% APR. As you move to the subsequent tables on the page, you can see that the interest rate for trans increases from 2% to 2.5%, 3%, and then 3.5%. And as they move across the page, the cost savings for trans decreases to the point where we only see cost savings for schools borrowing $1.5 million. The ASAP team will be working over the next several months to monitor the market and will provide a more accurate estimate of the interest rate as we get closer to the time of sale. With that, I'll turn it over to John Solarzik of RBC Capital.
Thank you, Nick. I'm John Solarzik of RBC, one of the underwriters of the notes. On the next few slides, we will get into some of the details about the program. We're structuring the trans to obtain a rating from Standard & Poor's, which we expect will to help us achieve the lowest possible interest rate for our participating schools. By creating a rated pool of loans, we expect to lower the cost for schools by spreading fees among many participants. We plan to have a reserve fund available to help provide security for investors. The reserve will be funded from grants from the U.S. Department of Education. As Nick mentioned on the previous slide, for the purposes of running cash flows for the S&P rated pool, we're using a 3% interest rate, which we believe to be on the higher end of our estimated range. There are several unknowns, including the size of the pool and the amount of competitive products in the market at the time that our notes are sold. We will be working over the next several months to monitor the market, and we will provide a more accurate estimate of the interest rate as we get closer to the time of sale. The short-term interest rate market today is at all-time historic low levels. In fact, the Fed signaled yesterday that they expect to hold rates near 0% through at least 2023. Although it seems as if these rates will stay very low for the near term, they could certainly be higher in February than they are today, given the ongoing uncertainty related to the pandemic, the election in November, and the current economic outlook. We are also contemplating a second series for those schools that don't meet the requirements for the first pool. The second series would not have the credit enhancement grant as a reserve fund. It would still, however, be eligible for the state intercept. We are expecting this series to have a lower credit rating or possibly be sold on an unrated basis. For the purpose of running cash flows for this pool, we're assuming an interest rate of 4%, which we also believe to be on the higher end of our estimated interest rate range in the current market. Next slide, please. Listed here are a few more features of the program. We plan to use the state intercept mechanism to repay the notes. As Katrina previously mentioned, CSFA already uses this for their long-term bond issuances for charter schools. The intercept will simplify repayment and provide additional security for investors, as funds will be taken off the top from the monthly apportionments and used to repay the loan. The State Treasurer's Office will support the offering as it does for long-term financings issued through CSFA. We will also use consistent documents and work with each charter school to ensure that they take proper board action. Typical note offerings involve schools having to prepare projected monthly cash flows to determine how much they can borrow. We are not planning on asking schools to prepare those cash flows. Instead, we will size their loan using the amount of the state deferrals, which should simplify the process for the schools. Next slide, please. In terms of timing, the state deferrals will occur between February and June of 2021. We expect to fund loans by the end of March, which should be early enough for schools to fund their deficits. Subject to demand from schools, we plan to offer another series later in the year. On the next slide, we summarize some of the key upcoming dates for the program. The application is currently up on the CSFA website. We will be accepting those applications until October 23rd. We expect to spend the next few months sizing the loans and preparing the financing documents. We will be looking for all participants to have their own board approvals in place by February 5th. We expect to have the offering in the market in early March. And as previously mentioned, funding is expected to be in place by the end of March. I'll now turn it over to Mike Kramer of Montague DeRose to go over some details on the sizing of the loans.
Thank you, John. I'd like to take a few minutes to discuss how the ASAP program loans are sized and repaid. The ASAP program will offer charters a total borrowing cost that is very competitive with other deferral financing options. CSFA expects the loans funded by the credit enhanced trans will be sized up to a maximum dollar amount equal to total deferrals, net of interest to be paid at maturity, and net of issuance costs. Of course, the loan amount can be less than this maximum amount. The table at right shows how the loan amounts will be calculated for various total deferrals, ranging from $250,000 to $5 million. Loan amounts for deferrals greater than $5 million will be available, but are not shown in the table. Schools with deferrals of less than $250,000 may find factoring to be more cost-effective than an ASAP loan, as Nick's slide 15 illustrated. Please note that while the figures in this table assume a 3% interest rate, the actual rate will not be set until the trans are priced in early March. Based on current market conditions, we believe our 3% interest rate assumption is a high-end figure. Looking at a total deferral of $750,000, the interest due at maturity is deducted to get to the loan principal amount of $733,000. Next, the estimated issuance costs are deducted from the loan principal amount to arrive at the net amount provided to the school the day the trans are closed and the loans are funded. Looking at the $750,000 example, the estimated issuance costs are $16,000, are deducted from the $733,000 loan amount, and the school is wired $717,000 on the day of closing. Amplifying John's comments from slide 16, the credit enhancement grant used to fund the loan loss reserve has criteria tying the loan amount to the school's facility expenses. Specifically, the criteria may limit a charter school's loan size to the amount expended on facilities in fiscal year 1920. If these expenses are less than the school's total deferrals, the loan application includes a request for 1920 facility expenses. As mentioned previously, a separate series of trans will be available to charters which do not meet the criteria of the enhancement grant, or in the event demand for the credit enhanced tran exceeds the lending capacity of the loan loss reserve. The best way for a school to determine its loan size to the ASAP program is to submit an application and contact a banking team representative like myself for an estimated loan sizing. Okay, next slide, please. As John mentioned, CSFA is planning for the first series of trans to be issued in late March. These trans, and therefore the loans, will mature by early January of 2022. All interest will be paid at maturity, and while the trans will be issued a few weeks after the February apportionments are dispersed, the February deferrals will be funded by the trans. The table at right carries forward our example of an ASAP loan taken to bridge total deferrals of $750,000. In March, the charter receives a net loan amount of $717,000 on the day the trans close, and the loans are funded. Loan payments are set aside monthly from late July through late November based on the deferred apportionment schedule set by the state. And in this example, the set-asides match the total deferral of $750,000. The loan set-aside payments will require no action by the school, as the state controller will automatically transfer these amounts to the third-party trustee, the U.S. Bank. If a deferral payment is inadequate to make the set-aside payment, the state controller will draw from that month's current apportionment to cover the shortfall. The loan will mature and be fully paid off by early January 2022. The loan repayment schedule allows for an additional month of apportionments between the late November set-aside payment and the early January loan maturity. This grace period, so to speak, will give the borrower and the financing team time to remedy any shortfall without having the loan placed into default. Next slide, please. On this slide, we present the 4 minimum requirements to apply for an ASAP loan. The first requirement is for the charter school to have been operational for the full 1920 fiscal year. Second, the legal structure of the charter school or authorized borrower must be a nonprofit public benefit corporation or limited liability company duly incorporated. The borrower must be in good standing under state laws. Third, the borrowing organization is described in section 501c3 of the IRS code and is exempt from federal income tax under 501a of the code. Lastly, the charter school is in good standing with this charter authorizer and in compliance with the terms of its charter at the time of application submission. Next slide, please. As I mentioned on slide 20, the credit enhancement grant used to fund the loan loss reserve has certain requirements. For a charter to receive a loan from the trans series secured by the loan loss reserve, it must satisfy 2 requirements. Because the loan loss reserve fund will reduce the borrowing cost, we believe that checking these boxes will be worth the effort. To satisfy the first requirement, a school must be able to certify that it meets at least one of the 4 items listed on the page relating to testing proficiency, academic status, and FRPM eligibility. The second requirement pertains to a limit on loan amount. At this time, we expect the loan size will be limited to the lesser of the charter's 2021 deferrals and its 1920 facilities expenses. CSFA appreciates this limitation may negatively impact non-site-based charter schools. So a separate series of trans will be available to charters that do not meet the criteria of the enhancement grant. This series will have a higher borrowing cost. The second series of trans also will fund loans in the event demand for the credit enhanced trans exceeds the lending capacity of the loan loss reserve. Funding from the credit enhanced trans will be awarded on a first come, first served basis. So we encourage schools to apply in advance of the deadline. Next slide, please. When you're ready to access the loan application, please navigate your web browser to the ASAP program webpage listed at the top of this slide. The completed loan application should be transmitted to asap@treasurer.ca.gov. You'll probably need to send more than one email to provide all the required documentation. I'd like to point out a few items about the loan application. The application requests information about the charter school and the intended borrower, if the intended borrower is different from the school. If the CMO is submitting applications for multiple schools with the CMO serving as the intended borrower, the loan application worksheet should be duplicated in the Excel file in order to complete one worksheet for each school. Applicants will be required to provide a short list of all outstanding and anticipated financial commitments and submit all relevant documentation with the application. Further instructions are provided in the application. Additional items such as charter agreement, financial audits, 20-21 adopted budget, and 19-20 attendance reports should be submitted with the application. Lastly, please note there is no cost to apply to the ASAP program, and the loan application deadline is October 23rd for the March 2021 loan disbursements. At this point, I will hand the presentation to CSFA's note counsel, Mark Bauer.
Thanks, Mike. My name is Mark Bauer, and I'm a partner with Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe, and we are serving as note counsel to CSFA in connection with the ASAP program. What we are looking at here is a diagram of the basic structure of the ASAP program. If you start near the bottom on the left side, you will see the charters. If you participate in the ASAP program, one of these boxes will represent you. You will enter into a loan agreement with CSFA, which will commit you to repaying the loan in exchange for the loan proceeds. CSFA will pull all the loans pursuant to terms of an indenture and issue notes to the securities market for purchase by investors. As a closing condition, each borrower will file an intercept notice that will instruct the state controller's office to send certain amounts from your deferred payments directly to the note trustee. So such amounts would be immediately available to pay debt service on the notes when due. The balance of the LCFF apportionments not accounted for in the intercept notice would then be sent to the relevant county offices of education to be provided to you, the school. Next slide, please. As discussed previously, you, the school, will enter into a loan agreement with CSFA. This agreement will document primarily the terms of the loan, set forth representations that the school will make, and covenants that the school will agree to for the period of time the notes are outstanding. Under the loan agreement, you will agree to execute an intercept notice that will tell the state controller to send the amounts needed to repay the loan directly to the note trustee. The amounts that will be part of the intercept notice will depend on how much your school borrows. Next slide, please. In order to close the financing, CSFA, note counsel, and the underwriters need to ensure certain items about you, the school. Some of these include that the note borrowing is not prohibited by your existing obligations, your school is in good standing with your authorizer, your representations that are made under the loan agreement are true and correct. In addition, an opinion of counsel representing you is required. Next slide, please. An important thing to note is that you will be required to engage in counsel who represents your interests and provide comfort to the working group about your status and operations. Orrick, who is serving as note counsel, is representing CSFA on the transaction and is not able to serve this role as borrower's counsel. The opinion that borrower's counsel will provide comfort about certain items, including the status of your organization as a nonprofit organization, qualifying under the Charter School Act, and qualifying as a borrower under the CSFA Act. Your ability to enter into these agreements and take on these binding obligations, including any conflict with any existing obligations you may have. And in addition, it will opine on the accuracy of the disclosure that is shared to the securities market in connection with the sale of notes. The entire ASAP working group has many years of experience working on charter school financings and can provide recommendations to you about lawyers and law firms who would be in a position to assist you in a borrower's counsel role. I will now pass it on to Katrina Johansson for some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Mark. So I just wanted to highlight the speakers and provide contact information today for those that participated. The city folks are not listed on here, but they are able, you are able to find their contact information on our program webpage. So Angela wanted to switch to slide 30. This is just a recap. So we do have an active web page that's launched. We do have an active application that's launched. And now we have the webinar information that will be available. So I wanted to highlight that, as Mike mentioned, the first series of pooled trans is expected to close and fund loans in late March. An additional series of pooled trans will close in May or June. Charters have the option to participate in any series. The completed loan application with required documentation should be transmitted to asap@treasurer.ca.gov by sending one or more emails. So if anyone is having trouble transmitting information to us, please give us a call at the number listed on the webpage or on this webinar. To highlight, there is absolutely no cost to apply to this program because it is an online application. We think it's going to be relatively streamlined to apply with no cost. We are hoping to have all applications in by October 23rd for funding in March. If you have any issues submitting your application by then, please give us a call. Loan funding will be awarded on a first come, first served basis, as Mike mentioned, related to the enhanced piece of this financing. If you didn't hear information that you needed to hear today, we do ask that you reach out to us. It appears that we have some questions and answers. So with that, I think, Mike, there were some questions teed up for you.
Yes, this is Annette Yee. I was going to read off the questions and
Perfect.
And have people respond.
That's great.
The first one is, and there are actually several sets of questions along the same vein. So if a school has an existing bond, does this preclude them from participating in the ASAP program? Mike, maybe you could start us off.
It doesn't. This is Mike. It doesn't preclude them from being an ASAP loan borrower. As you will see in the application, we ask a few questions about existing obligations or obligations that are expected for this year. So, you know, a long-term facility financing shouldn't be a problem. I think the only type of commitment that would be a direct problem with the loan is if the school has already sold some of its receivables for the July through November period of next year, because we would need to access those deferrals to repay the loan. So I think that's the one direct conflict we've seen, but we encourage you to apply. Let us take a look at your existing commitments and we will get back to you.
Yeah,
Okay.
This is Mark.
Go ahead, Mark. I'm
Just
sorry.
wanted to add to that. As Mike said, it really depends on what is in your bond documents, on what the restrictions are. And, you know, there are typical additional debt tests that do have broad authority for short-term borrowing. So if that is what you would have in your bond docs, then it would allow to be a part of this program. But as I said, it would it's a school by school basis, document by document basis. So we would need to look at all that information.
Okay, and I think this is a related question. Will charter schools, there are two kind of back to back, will charter schools who have gone through bond financing for school site purchasing be eligible in the ASAP program? And secondly, what if we already have an intercept for bonds? So either Mike or Mark.
Yeah, this is Mark again. the same kind of answer. Really, we would need to look at the documents, and they would set forth on how you would treat a additional intercept. Having the intercept itself does not preclude participation in this program and doing a subsequent intercept. We just need to make sure that in those documents it would allow for that, and then we would file another intercept and provide controller notice that there was 2 intercepts for the school.
Okay, and then I have another question. Is the state SPED deferral official? I was under the impression that it was still to be determined. Eric?
Thanks, Annette. If one looks at the statute here, it refers to all of the principal apportionment programs in Ed Code section 14041 sub A, which includes special ed, LCFF, among other programs. I emailed back and forth with California Department of Ed staff in mid-July, and they confirmed that special ed would be included. It's possible something has changed since then, but we'll circle back with folks if things have changed. But for now, we do anticipate that the special ed apportionment will also be deferred, the 602 portion, the state aid 602 portion.
Okay. If we apply in October, are we obligating ourselves to take the loan in March? Is there flexibility? And also, when will additional rounds fund? Mike?
Thanks, Annette. If we could turn back to slide 19, that's the schedule. We have the key dates. So slide 19. Okay, so what slide 19 shows, and you'll be able to see this when you download the presentation. It lays out the key dates for the first funding round, and we expect that to close by end of March. So, so the application deadline is by October 23rd. We'll work with the schools to size their loan, and we'll work with the attorneys on the team at Orrick and Nixon Peabody to prepare the offering document and the loan documents, and that'll happen for a couple of months. And then the schools will seek board approval and have that in hand by February 5th. We'd like to have that handled and all board approved before the item goes to the authority board, which we're looking at for the week of February 8th. One thing to add also on the schedule is that, we will be waiting on CDE to certify P1 apportionments, which is why we have a little bit of delay in the schedule. Once we have those figures in hand, those are pretty much set in stone when it comes to deferrals. So we want to use those and have the latest information to size the loans and put that information in the offering document. So then we would post the offering document, which is called the POS, to investors the week of March 1st. So by that point, let's say by late February, that is going to be the go, no-go decision for the charters. So by that point, you should have had your loan size, you've been working on the documents, you've had the documents board approved. I would say that's the deadline if you want an opt-out of the borrowing, to do that by end of February. We've also had a question about the next funding round. At this point, as we kind of mentioned on one of the slides, we're looking at a second series of trans with ASAP loans to come in May or June. We don't have a timeline for that just yet, but I think we'll probably have an application deadline for that round probably sometime in March. I would caution you though, as I mentioned, the loan loss reserve is going to have limited debt capacity. So if that's all used up with the first series that goes in March, then the second series that comes in May or June will not have that enhancement and will have a higher borrowing cost. So you may want to consider that in the time of your application. Okay, Annette?
Okay. If we are submitting an application, are we bound to execute the purchase if the interest rate ends up being too high for us? That's probably, Mike, you can answer that.
Yeah, I think, while we're cautious today talking about the interest rate, we've given a range on one of the slides, whether it's between 2 to 3%. As we've mentioned, we think the rate now is through those levels, but that's based on current conditions. We're not pricing the the trans and the loans have the same rate as the trans. I'm not pricing those for a number of months until March. So we're cautious, but as we get closer to that date, say into early 2021, into February, we'll be providing updates on rates to all the applicants and the borrowers. So you'll have a good sense of where the rate's going to be, by the end of February, I'd imagine. So again, end of February is probably the last chance to opt out of the financing. Once you've gone to pricing, we have to stay with the tran amounts and the loan amounts. So at that point, you'll be committed. But we'll provide a lot of updates on interest rates and costs, and we'll be full transparency going into that pricing. Annette, I know we had a question about the facility cost issue and the grant.
Sure.
So let me touch on that again before you get a chance to type it out.
Sure.
So as I mentioned, the credit enhancement grant, it's a grant given to the authority for long-term facility financing for charters. The authority has received a waiver from the U.S. Department of Ed to use the grant for working capital for this program. But there still is a connection and nexus with the facility purpose. So we believe that we will have to limit the loan size to the charter's, full fiscal year facility costs. So we're using 1920. While we're still working out the details with the DOE, and there's a small chance that percentage could go down below 100%. I wouldn't hang my hat on it. I think we're just saying it's going to be 100%. So it's going to be the lesser of your facility cost and your deferrals. We think for most site-based schools, this will not be a problem. If you're non-site-based or elsewise, it may limit your loan size. But as I mentioned, we are preparing to have a second series of notes to cover that eventuality for non-site-based, and also the possibility that we exceed the debt capacity of the loan loss reserve in the first series, the borrowers will go into the second series. As I mentioned before too, these are first come, first served applications. So, to kind of reserve your space in that credit enhanced series, we encourage you to apply soon and get yourself in the queue.
Okay. Let's see. There was a question about SB 740 funding affecting TRAN funding, and I thought Katrina could answer that. It just said SB 740 funding and the effect on TRAN funding.
I guess we'd have to understand the question a little better, Annette. So.
Okay, well, maybe you can explain what SB 740 funding is.
Sure. So the Charter School Facility Grant Program is an annual funding program. It's a grant program where eligible schools apply for 75% of their facility costs. So they receive, I believe, depending on their expenses, 3 to 4 disbursements from CSFA of facility funding. So those, that money is it's apportioned through the budget. We're getting $138 million for 2021. So there won't be a holdup of that program's funding. So I don't believe there will be an impact on 740 applying for the TRAN program, but I would like to understand the question a little better. So if whoever asked can reach out to us, we'd be happy to answer that. Mark,
Katrina, this is Eric. Perhaps they're asking if the cash flow for the SB 740 program will be delayed, and our understanding is that the SB 740 funding will flow on its normal schedule and is not affected by these deferrals.
Correct. Yeah, we have not heard anything like that from finance. If that did not answer your question, please reach out to us.
Okay, let's see. We applied to the trans application that was due last Friday. Do we need to apply again? It sounds like that was for more traditional districts or colleges. Mike, can you take that one?
Yes, so the authority is running 2 train pools right now. One is this program for charters. The other is for school districts and community college districts. So if you applied through the K through 14 program, you will need to reapply with this application. We apologize for that confusion.
The other documents that we need under this program that are are not required under the other program. So we believe
Right.
the application is pretty streamlined.
Great. Thank you. And again, if you have any questions on things, if you did apply on the K through 14 program, I think we've reached out to you and asked you to reapply. And now that the website is up with the application, please do so. And if you have questions, just let us know. Okay. On slide 22, Angela, can you go back to that slide? We have 2 dependent charter schools. They are covered under, oh, and by the way, Mark, this is going to be for you, so I'll give you the heads up. We have 2 dependent charter schools. They are covered under the district tax ID, not a 501c3. Does this mean they do not qualify for the ASAP program?
If you apply and we can get all the information, we can sort through that. There may be ways to make it work, but I can't speak to it at this point.
Right. So we need more details. So please apply, and then we'll direct that specific question to Mark. Or, you know, even if you don't apply, if you want to just contact the finance team through the website, that would be great. And we'll try to answer your question.
Dependent, Annette, they might want to look at the other program. So we should, whoever is asking the question should reach out to us and schedule a call.
Makes sense. Okay. Is board approval required for application to the ASAP program in October or just by February?
There's no board approval required to apply to the program. It'll come later in the process. So we would have the charter schools that are going to be borrowers approve their loan documents, et cetera, by early February. There's a very planned process to these documents. So this is not something you can just take to your board in a simple resolution to approve without our involvement. So we'll be giving you everything you need to take to your board, and we'll provide a lot of information about how that process works.
Okay.
But if folks did want to share webinar information with their board in advance of February, I mean, it's, you know, a good idea to share this kind of information with your board.
Okay. Will PPP program funds interfere or impact the ASAP program approval? Mark?
No, those are separate funds, and shouldn't have anything related to the deferral. So, we could size it based on your application and take that into account, or what you think you need to borrow, but it should not affect the qualification to the program itself.
Okay. Is this just a one-year program? I think the deferrals will be expected to go over 2 to 3 years. Mike, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, our plan is to have this program up and running again next year. The authority is spending a fair amount of time this year getting this set up. We do expect there'll be additional deferrals in the state budget for 21-22. So we will have this available for all of next year as well, and possibly even beyond that if necessary.
Yeah, I'll just concur, Annette. As CSFA, the board, we have the board support for this program, and we've issued notes routinely. So this is going to be a program that's built into our portfolio for the deferrals and beyond.
Right. So it's going to be an ongoing program. And let's see, is there a limit to the amount of applicants that can receive the loan? That is there a maximum loan pool? Probably Mike can address that one
Yeah,
as well?
I can address. There will be a limited amount of debt capacity under the credit enhanced series, as I mentioned. However, we will have a second series that will not have a limitation on it. So the program will be able to accommodate every charter that applies and needs deferral funding.
Okay. If we use this program for deferrals, but need to borrow money in the fall, would the program allow this additional borrowing without requiring the later funding to be in second position? Not sure who to, maybe Mark?
I think that's an ongoing conversation, and maybe
Got it.
John,
John Solarzik.
or Mike can speak to that.
Oh, this is John. I would say that we, generally speaking, for the deferrals that are advanced, then those payments will be secured. The notes will be secured by those, so you can't obviously double dip there. I think that there probably won't be restriction on further financings the schools do if they do other kinds of borrowing, but that's, as Mark said, that's something that's an ongoing discussion of what limitations we'll have to put in from the credit standpoint to make sure we get the rating we want and the interest rate we want.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if this was answered in that previous question. Will this intercept be subordinate to intercepts already set up for the bonds issued through CSFA?
Yeah, it depends on what's allowed in your existing obligations. If it is if it's an obligated group structure that you have and it allows for parity debt, it would be on parity most likely. What will be issued here. So, the typical situation with the additional debt tests that allow for short-term debt issuance, they would be on parity.
Okay. Does the borrower's counsel opinion need to be needed for submitting the application by October 23rd? Mike?
No, it's not needed it's not needed to submit the application.
Right. So just submit the application, please, and we will tell you what the next steps are, including providing us with the borrower counsel's opinion as a follow-up. Here's a question for Katrina. Is CSFA participating in a different bond program for deferral financing, or is this the only bond program that it is participating in?
This is the ASAP program for deferrals. So is the question, are we offering other programs to weather deferrals outside of the ASAP program?
That's right. Are any other programs being sponsored by CSFA, or is this the only one?
This is the only program, and this is the only program that we intend to issue through CSFA.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. How about schools that were not in operation in 2019-20, since that was one of the requirements of this program? What can they do? Is there a program available for them?
Can I add something?
Yes, please. I didn't know who to ask that of.
Our revolving loan fund, so you can go to our website. Our revolving loan fund is holding an extraordinary round because we have capacity in that program. And the RLF program is structured for new charter schools. So please reach out to me with questions on that extraordinary round. There are obviously eligibility criteria, and it's up to $250,000. So that's the constraint there, but please do reach out to us because we are, I believe, opening that application period soon, if it isn't already opened. So,
Katrina, we are at a little after 2 p.m. We are scheduled to go to 2:30. Are we going to continue taking questions for the rest of the time? There are quite a few questions.
I would say maybe till 2:15 if that works for the group.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
And if I can, if I can just jump in. There's been a few questions again about the minimum application requirements, and
yes,
we lay these out on starting on slide 22. So as was mentioned, the school would have needed been operational for last year, for 1920. They cannot be a new school and be eligible for the ASAP program. But, you know, the authorities RLF program is there for them to apply to. That's a good option. I would say there is no limitation or requirement that your charter be classroom-based. So if you're a non-classroom-based charter, you are eligible to apply, just with the caveat that we do have that limitation on facility expenses. So I understand that facility issue is kind of nuanced. So we've answered a few questions on that. I think if you have more questions, the best thing to do is just to contact us. You can call me, this is Mike, or you can email me, and we can sort out your specific situations. Probably just best to do it on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, how about, is the timing the same on the subsidized program as the non-subsidized program? I'm assuming that that is referring to the credit enhancement grant.
Correct. Yeah, the timing will be the same.
Okay, thank you.
Unless Mike, the sense is that funds will be available at the same time, regardless of whether it's enhanced or not.
Right, that is the timing will be the same.
Okay, and there was a question about because there may be a limitation due to oversubscription in the credit enhancement portion of the program. What is first come, first serve based on the application submittal date?
Correct.
Okay.
So we do need to address those charters that applied, Mike, under the K-14 webpage. So we'll have to confer on that as a group.
Okay. Let's see.
I see a question in that that's asking about if this is a multi-year program, which it is, if the application this year is good for subsequent years. I would say at this point, no. I think, you know, we'll have a new funding round for 21-22 that'll start sometime, you know, after July 1st of 2021.
Right, so it's a multiple year program, but we will, even though you've applied for this year, we would like you to reapply next year if you need money again in the following year.
Correct.
Okay.
We'll need information, and I don't know how many have looked at the webpage in the application, but it is very, you know, it's structured to be very easy to use. So, you know, if anyone has any issues with uploading documents or emailing documents, please reach out to us, because that sometimes can be a barrier to submitting an application.
If a school's charter petition expires in June 2021 and the new petition is not yet approved, would this be an issue with participating in the program? That maybe Mike to start off with, and then someone else can follow up.
I can jump in, and then maybe Mark or John will weigh in. It's not going to preclude you from applying and be considered, but you know, before we actually get to the point of giving the offering statement to investors in early March and pricing, we will have to have seen that you are making significant progress with your authorizer. And of course, everybody has to be in good standing with their authorizer too. So I would say if we can't see that it's likely that your charter will be renewed, then you would probably not be able to participate in the March series, but maybe in the May or June series.
Okay. And there were a number of questions about, submitting various of the requirements at the time of the application. And the answer to that is that you do not, just please fill out the application. And then the other requirements that are required, like the council opinion letter, et cetera, can be submitted later. Here's another question.
Yeah, this is Mark.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Mark.
About the borrower council
Please.
opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, that will be delivered at the end of the entire process. So,
right.
Everyone will do their due diligence, understand your organization, provide disclosure, market the bonds, and then at the end, the borrower's council will provide an opinion that clarifies and provides comfort to everything we had just done. So on the day that the funding happens, that opinion will be delivered. So okay. That is at the end of the process.
Okay, and then what about the good standing authorizer letter? Is that similarly towards the end, or is it sooner in the process?
That's something that CSFA will reach out to authorizers on behalf of applicants. So that's something that CSFA staff will be verifying.
Okay. Will additional information be provided to charter authorizers regarding their role in the ASAP program? For instance, if a charter has had fiscal issues in the past and considered high risk.
I mean, the interaction would be with the authorizer related to good standing and compliance. I'm not sure, Mark Bauer or John, if you see if there's an issue related to fiscal standing with the authorizer, or Eric.
I think the concern is general risk of non-renewal and revocation of the charter. So that any issues that the authorizer has that would add to that possibility would be more risk, and that's really a marketing question on what the rating agencies and investors, the extent of risk that they would accept.
Well, agreed, Mark. We'll have to look on a case-by-case basis on those scenarios and see how many of those schools we have in the pool and what the impact is on the overall credit and what each case is going to be. Though we have to be some nuance, I think, to that.
This is Mike. I would just add too that in some ways the application, the credit review is a binary decision. I mean, if the school is in good standing and we don't have concerns about it's going concern. If we think it'll be open for this year and the next year at least, that may be adequate. We look a lot as investors to the state controller intercept to repay the notes, because those dollars are taken off the top and diverted to the trustee. So that provides also a lot of security to investors. It also helps enhance the rating. So that's something that we bring to the table with this program that other deferral financing programs don't have.
There was a question about how to calculate the amount of the TRAN. Can you take that, Mike? I know we covered it, but I think may need further clarification.
We did. If we wanted to flip back to slide 20, that's where I laid that out. So we have the table that shows for just, example deferrals from $250,000 to $5 million. We've laid out how this works. So we look at the school's deferrals that, of course, are subject to intercept for repayment. We deduct from that what we expect to have to use other deferrals to pay interest on the loan, which is what we show in column B on slide 20. That kind of gets us to column C, which is the principal amount of the loan. And then from there, we just deduct the issuance costs that would be paid at closing. And then in the last column, column E, this is the net amount to the school. So I think this is fairly simple as to how we size how we size the loans, and how we get to a net amount for the school. The one unknown here really is just at this point is the interest cost is subject to market conditions. We are working to finalize issuance costs in the next few weeks. So I would say by early October, we would probably have those pretty firm when we give estimates to charters that inquire about the loans. But we'll still be making an assumption about the interest rate until we actually price the trans and then the loans.
Okay, we got a question about how we can compare the various trans costs. I assume the various trans programs costs before making a decision. Mike, can you address that, please?
Well,
Or
we
Katrina.
can give. Well, I'll just say that we've asked for all the schools to contact us for an estimate. We will size the loan and give you what we think is our best estimate, subject to market conditions. We think this is pretty much as transparent as you can be on this process. We'd have to have the charters look to their other alternatives, or if they have an advisor, work with them to assess other options. Maybe if Eric or Nick want to weigh in on this question.
Sure, this is Nick. I would just say we've had many discussions with a whole bunch of folks on both the for-profit side and nonprofit side that are aware that schools need help in this area and are willing and able to do so. And so to the extent that you work with CSFA and the ASAP team and get a kind of a projection of what the program entails for your school, and you want to compare it to other options, feel free to reach out to us if you don't already have connections with folks that might be able to provide kind of an analysis of what else is available. We're happy to help make those connections. And then, I think it's like anything else, schools should shop around and get as much information as they can and see what works best for them and then make a decision.
Yeah, I would just concur with what Nick said. I think as the borrower, you have the discretion to ask for cost up front. And so as Mike mentioned, we're going to be able to provide those in a few weeks based on, the trans size. So, that's what we would recommend, that you ask for information and just, make a determination based on cost and timing.
Yeah, this is Eric, and we'd be happy to do the same out of our shop at CSDC.
Okay, well, we have had a lot of the same questions come up again and again, and I don't want to keep asking the same questions. I think I've covered the majority of the questions, but if we haven't, please reach out to anyone on the finance team with your questions. I think a lot of these are very kind of specific to your situation, so it might be better to have a one-on-one conversation. What I'd like to do at this point is ask Angela to turn us to the to slide 30, and then Katrina can wrap us up.
Thanks, Annette, and thank you all for sticking with us for the last hour and 15 minutes. It's an honor to serve the state of California and the charter schools within the state. So we do appreciate you showing up and sharing this information with us. Just to recap again, our program page is up and running on the CSFA page. We are looking to issue the first series of notes by late March. Charters will have the option to participate in any series, and we will be requiring documentation to be submitted via the email that we provided here. Again, if you have any technical issues, please reach out to me or anyone on our team, and we will help you get those documents in with your application. There's no cost to apply, and the loan application deadline, as Mike mentioned, is October 23rd. But if you have any issues with the submission, please reach out to us and we will work with you on that. And then loan funding will be awarded on a first come, first served basis as it relates to that credit enhanced pool. So with that, I want to thank you. So long, stay well, and have a great day.